Good evening, California rare fruit growers. My name is Ryan Joe, and I'm currently a senior in high school. Now, if you don't know about me, growing tropical fruit trees is my passion. So much so, I have a greenhouse. I'm not from here. I'm actually from Tennessee. I'm on vacation, and the opportunity to talk here presented itself. Um, Mr. James put a topic on the Tropical Fruit Forum requesting speakers. So I was like, hey, maybe I can speak here. And turned out it worked out. So now I'm here. So for my talk today, I will be talking about jaboticabas. If you don't know, they're a fruit native to Brazil, and they're very ornamental and beautiful, and I highly recommend growing them. So as you can see here, here's my greenhouse up in Tennessee. Because the climate is cold, I need to grow everything in a greenhouse or I will move them in when it is cold. So it's a 20 by 28, 12-foot peak. And these are the trees that are growing in ground. So as you can see, I have some guava, mango, sapodilla, lychee, rollinia, several jaboticabas, a loquat. A lot of these are fruiting or are getting to the size of fruiting. And as someone who collects fruit trees, I need a place to get them. So each year I will go down to Florida, maybe once, maybe twice, maybe even 3 times, and visit all my friends. And I'll pick up a lot of new fruit trees and a lot of fruits. As you can see, a lot of these new Florida mangoes. So this is pictures from my last trip, um, last week of June this year. And you can see I picked up a lot of cool mangoes and fruiting madruno, some different mangoes, more jabuticabas, a lot of rare stuff. So I love growing jabuticabas. So this is what I'm going to talk about tonight. And I have over 75 varieties in Tennessee. So definitely a lot. So I feel like I'm qualified to talk about this a little bit. So this is my biggest jabuticaba tree so far. It's a Sabra multi-graft. I have some different varieties on it. And it's about 10 years old, and it still hasn't fruited yet. As you will know, jabuticabas are mostly slow to fruits, so that's a downside. But before I go on to more about jabuticabas, I just want to clear up some of the naming conventions about this fruit. So when naming jabuticabas, we use binomial classification, then variety if possible. But sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes we don't really know the species. Some still need names, and some of them are mislabeled in the nursery trade. For example, you may see the common Jaboticaba, Plinia Jaboticaba variety Sabra, which is the true name, but they mislabel it as Mercieria cauliflora. It's incorrect. It's not a Mercieria. So I just wanted to clear up. I'll be using the most up-to-date names by growers and researchers today. But before I go into jaboticabas, I'm going to do a brief look into the Mercieria genus. This is a very close genus, close cousin of the Plinia genus. It's very ornamental and generally quick to flower, unlike the Plinias. And their common names really reflect their closeness to the jaboticaba. Pictured here is Mercieria cuspidata. It's a rare one coming out of Brazil, probably introduced in the last 5 years or so. So first off, we're going over Mercieria glazioviana. This is known as the yellow jaboticaba. You can see the fruits and the flowers. This is my tree. I really recommend this one. The fruit tastes like apricots. The downside is there's a pretty big seed and the rind is pretty thick, but it's really good and it's a very beautiful tree, as you can see. It will definitely benefit from having another tree for pollination, as they don't really set by themselves. They take several cycles of flowering before setting fruits. Moving on to Yes.
This is a singular. Most of the Jaboticabas right on the trunk, and they're in a cluster, like
Correct.
grapes.
Yes.
Does this one cluster or grow individually?
Individually, this is a Mercieria, so it's a relative of the Jaboticaba, but you can tell there's several differences between Mercierias and Plinias. Plinias are what you think of as Jaboticabas. Mercerias generally flower on the new branch tips, as you can see in this picture, whereas Plinias will fruit on the trunk. Having a little bit of technical difficulties. I don't know why it's. Oh. Moving on from the yellow Jaboticaba, we are going on to Mercieria dubia. This one is known as the, okay. Dubia, this one is known as the Camu Camu. It's very high in vitamin C content. And there's a huge potential for commercialization in the health food industry. And that's exactly what Camu Camu Farms did. Greg Arabi, he's from South Louisiana. He trialed them out and is currently growing out a huge Camu Camu farm and plans to have the supplements hit the health food markets. I don't really recommend growing this one. It's pretty finicky to pH. And in its native habitat in the Amazon, it's flooded for around 6 months of the year.
Does it have this much vitamin C? Is acerola?
I'm not sure. I know acerola has a lot of vitamin C. About, Moving on to Mercieria strigipes. I don't really have much information about this. Its common name is the beach cambuca. And the fruits are very similar to the yellow Jaboticaba. And we are guessing it has a little bit more flesh in the fruits. So that's why we are collecting that. Yes. This one is the Mercieria glomerata, known as the red cabeluta. This one is extremely rare, and it's also often mixed up with Mercieria glaziobiana. So Mercieria glaziobiana, the yellow Jaboticaba, is, we used to synonymize the name with glomerata, but if you know what the true glomerata is, they're not the same. It's extremely rare, and in the US, I'd say no more than 30 people have this plant. I was happy to get some signs from a collector, which I've grafted up on my tree, but I don't know if they've taken yet, so I'm hoping. Moving on to Mercieria vexator. This one is called the blue Jaboticaba. It's a very beautiful tree, but unfortunately the fruits do not taste good. Some people like them, but I'm not a fan of them. There's a large seed in the fruits and a pretty thick peel, and the peel is very tannic. So if you eat that, it's not going to taste good. Now moving on to the Plinias. We can subdivide the genus into two parts. There's the yellow Plinias, and then there's the rest. And according to the plantlist.org, there are 69 accepted species of Plinia, and there are hundreds of varieties. So there's a huge potential to collect a lot of these. So moving on to the yellow Plinias, these are less cold tolerant than the traditional ones. A lot of these cannot really take a hard frost. There's, Plinia edulis, inflata, rara, salticola, clausa, colosa, and others, which I'll cover in a little bit. These produce some of the largest fruits in the genus, very big and very tasty. But except for the cambuca, not many others have been fruited in the US. So first off, we have Plinia salticola. This one, photo credits from Jim West coming out of his farm in Ecuador. Now it's reported to be pretty precocious, fruiting in about 4 years. But again, that's in Ecuador. You bring a plant up here, it's going to take a lot longer than that. I believe this one has been around for a little bit, but no one's fruited it yet. And the fruits are purported to be a little bit spicy and not much flesh to them. Moving on to Plinia inflata, also known as the mulchi. This one has giant fruits, and according to the taste reports, very good, very sweet. Again, this one is pretty slow growing, and collectors in the US have not fruited this one yet. I think it'll take a couple more years, maybe even more. Moving on to Plinia edulis, this one is the Cambuca. I was fortunate to taste this fruit, and I can say I highly recommend it. It tastes like a little bit of mango and peach together, and the flesh is gelatinous. Very good. As you can see here, the graft is actually on Sabra. This is my tree, but grafting the yellow plinias onto the regular plinias can often, it's uncertain and can often result in delayed incompatibility because the genetic distance between Plinia edulis and the regular Jaboticaba is pretty far. Moving on to Plinia rara. This is one of the largest Plinia fruits, and it tastes like green apple. Papa Joe, he has tasted some of these. He's actually here, so you can talk to him after the meeting if you want to know more about these fruits. He said it tasted it was a little bit cottony, but it's definitely sweet. This one's pretty rare too. I'm fortunate to be growing one. I have one that's about 2 years old, but it's only about 4 inches tall. It's been pretty slow for me. But it makes the way it fruits is really interesting. You'll send out a flower out of the trunk on a really long stem. And then it'll form a fruit, and the fruit will be on the ground or almost touching the ground. And then a wild animal will come up and eat it and then disperse the seeds. So it's a really cool mechanism. Moving on to Plinia calosa. This one is also something kind of related to Plinia rara. It's also very rare and the same characteristics I described, and it's pretty similar in taste. Plinia clausa, this one, photo credit is from Joe too. And according to him, it tastes very sweet and acidic, and he highly likes it. Very big fruit too, and also it's slow growing. In a better climate, it'll grow fast. Some collectors in the US have had it flower, but to my knowledge, I do not think this has been fruited either. And now, after covering the yellow plinias, I'm going to go over the normal plinias. This is what comes to mind when you think of a Jaboticaba, and we can subdivide this into different species and varieties. This first one is called Plinia Jaboticaba variety Sabra. This is the most common one in the world, and it is very important as rootstock. But don't get me wrong, the fruits on this are extremely good, and there's a reason it's the most common one in the world, as you know, the fruits are arguably the best tasting. Next, we're going on to Plinia phitrantha. There's around 25 plus known varieties and hybrids, and maybe even more nowadays, because we have a lot coming out of China and Taiwan. These are generally faster fruit, but they are unstable from seed. So if you plant a seed of it, it's probably not going to be like the mother tree. The fruit may change color from red to white, but the leaves may look different. And then well-known varieties include Isalc, Sanford, Novak, Rosa de Piscoco, Sapucaia, and Brancovino. So I'll quickly go over these. Isalc was developed at one of the colleges in Brazil, Sao Paulo. It's big fruit. But the Isalc trees in circulation in the United States are actually seedlings of that. So we're not really impressed with the fruits of our seedlings. Some collectors have posted, very thick skin, very big seeds. But again, it was a seedling, so the real Isalc in Brazil is probably better. There's Sanford. Danford is another great Vitrantha, grown out by Flying Fox Fruits. I don't know if you guys have heard of him. He has a farm down in Central Florida. The story is he planted out a bunch of Plinia ariana seeds, which is known as the white Jaboticaba. And one of those seedlings he planted came up a little weird. And then he's like, hey, I'll keep watch on this one. And then when it fruited, the fruit was red. So he thinks that a Vitrantha seed got thrown into the Ariana seeds, but it's a great variety, big fruits, and it's highly recommended by other growers. There's the Novak Vitrantha. This one comes from Charles Novak in Florida. He had a pretty large collection of Jaboticabas. So this is one from his place that we named. There's also Rosa de Piscopo. So it's supposed to be pink or red and the fruits have a neck to them. But again, from seed, it's not really true to type. So I recently picked up a white Rosa de Piscopo from John Travis Morton. So again, it's not red or pink.
Do you know if he's related to?
I don't think he is. No. So again, it's with Vitranthas, it's just about growing out the seedlings and selecting the trees with the best fruits. Sapucaia or Sapucaia, this one is from Brazil. It's said to make a pink fruit and make aborted seeds. So that's one we were really excited about. But then when we fruited it, some of them had large seeds. So again, it's about selecting them. We don't really have graphs of these. So the best chance is just plant out a whole bunch of seedlings and select the best varieties. And lastly, we have Brancavino. This translates to white wine. This one I really recommend. It's a very compact grower. It grows straight up. And the fruits are reported to taste really good by collectors like John Travis Morton. Moving on to Plinia oblongata. This one is known as the sour Jaboticaba. It's widely used as a rootstock in Asia. So I've actually been experimenting with this as rootstock. I've planted out several trays of seeds, hoping to see if it really works as rootstock. And the fruits are quite big, but it's a little bit sour. Its common name is also Jaboticaba azeda. So it translates to the sour Jaboticaba. Moving on to Plinia cauliflora. We have Asu paulista, Otto Anderson, Roxa pulpa, paulista, and Novax. So these are all varieties of Plinia cauliflora. The Asu paulista makes big fruits, highly liked. Same with the Otto Anderson cauliflora, huge fruits. The Roxa pulpa is notable because it makes purple pulp, unlike others that have white pulp. There's the paulista. Yep. There's the paulista, also known to make big fruits, but from seed it takes a long time. I've heard people say around 20 years. And then there's the Novak's cauliflora, another one selected from Charles Novak's place. And then also have a special mention to the red Jaboticaba. This one's also another common one. And same with the scarlet. So they're not a Plinia cauliflora, but they're actually a cross. The red ones, Plinia cauliflora crossed with Plinia ariana, which is the white Jaboticaba. And then the scarlet one is the red, and then we back crossed it with the ariana. So the red and scarlet both make great fruits. They fruit several times a year, and they're very fast to fruit from seed. They fruit in about 3 years, in 3 to 5 years. So it's very fast. I highly recommend getting these if you're definitely new into Jaboticabas. Next up, we have Plinia ariana. And well-known varieties of these include Brancamel, C16, Lemongrass, UMFG, and Zona de Mata. The Brancamel translates to drop of honey. It is purported to be a very good tasting one. And on the left, that is a picture of my Brancamel tree. And on the right, you can see some fruits from John Travis Morton. These fruits are from the most common one, the white Jaboticaba, but it's not a named variety. The white Jaboticaba here in the US is not named. We just call it a white Jaboticaba, and it makes co-state fruits, as you can see. But if you're into collecting Jaboticabas, if you say white Jaboticaba, will be like, what variety is it? Because there's several different varieties. So these fruits are not smooth. You can see the ridges on them. That's what it is. There's also a variety that makes smooth fruits, so it's smooth all the way around. But these are co-state. There's ridges on the fruits. Moving on to Plinia coronata. This one's a really cool species. And common varieties include Coronata heshtinga, Olho de Boy, and the Olho de Boy selection, and crowns 1, 2, and 3. So Coronata heshtinga is the most common Coronata in the US, and that's for a reason. It's because it can take a slightly higher pH, and it can also take some salt exposure.
And that is about the average size of most of the cockles that you find that are fairly common.
Correct. So this one's also a nice one. There's Olho de Boy and Olho de Boy selection. These translate to Eye of the Bull. So these are some of the biggest fruits out there. We're getting over 4 centimeters. I was fortunate to taste Olho de Boy, not the selection, but the regular one. And unfortunately, it was not as good as I expected. The fruit wasn't as big. It was a new tree that was fruiting. A collector from Florida sent it to me. But the selection I hear is much better, bigger fruits and more flesh to eat. So I'm excited for that when they start fruiting in the US. But again, the Olho de Boys can take a long time from seed. So we're trying to get grafted plants. But to my knowledge, there's very few grafted plants available. And then there's crowns 1, 2, and 3. These are varieties released by Pine Island Nursery. Pine Island Nursery is down in South Florida around Miami. About 10 years ago, they released these 3. We don't really know much about them other than they're a type of coronata. The leaves are very beautiful on them. Each 1, 2, and 3, they each differ a little bit, but we don't really know much about the fruit other than it tastes sweet. And now moving on to Plinia trunciflora. There are several varieties out there, but it's very rare. So if you have a Plinia trunciflora, it's, for a regular collector, it's like, oh, I have Plinia trunciflora. But if you really collect them, there's several varieties out there, including the dwarf, Novak, Cafe Rahata, and Grumit Chama, to name a few. I don't really have much information on these. There's a dwarf one coming from John Travis Morton. It's really cool because it has a dwarfing habit. So I saw his tree, it's about 8 years old and it's only about 3 feet tall. There's also the Novak trunciflora that's coming from Charles Novak's place. There's Cafe Rahada and Grumichama. These 2 are very new, released out of Brazil. Grumichama is named after the Grumichama fruit, Eugenia brasiliensis, as they have similar tastes. What makes this stand out is the fruits have a peduncle. So instead of normally being on the trunk, the fruits will actually come out, about a centimeter or so on a peduncle. And it has a very weeping habit, so the trees look very beautiful. But again, this one can be slow to fruit from seed, so it's advised to get grafted plants. This one is Plinia species Grimmel, also known as Peludo de Alagoas. As you can see, this one, we have not assigned this a species yet, although this has been in cultivation for over 20 years. These are large fruited and very easy to grow, and the fruits taste exactly like a muscadine. If you guys have had that, I highly recommend this variety. It's very good. It can take a little bit more droughts and a little bit of higher pH. It's very beginner friendly, and the fruits are absolutely amazing. Now moving on to basic care of Jaboticabas. This is very important step in growing Plinias. What works for some people may not work for others, but this is what most people go off of, and this is where I've seen the best results. So first off, starting with water, we want to keep the pH as, close to neutral as possible, because in the long run, keeping the pH down for the trees is very important. So water and soil can affect the tree's pH. So we want to make sure our water is not basic. So pH below 7 or at 7 if possible. And then for soil, we want to have something that's a little bit acidic. So a common soil mix people will use is peat and perlite, around 90% peat and 10% perlite. But I found several downsides to this, as the peat is very hydrophobic. So when you make the soil, you have to water it in and mix it. And then also after, 6 months to a year, the peat will start to break down and it can cause an anaerobic state in the pot, causing your Jaboticaba tree to decline. So for soil, I recommend ProMix. ProMix is basically peat and perlite, but they also have several compounds added in to help. So for example, they have a wetting agent, so you don't need to water in the soil. And also they have several other compounds like dolomites and stuff to prevent it from breaking down. And all the Plinias I've grown in this mix have done exceptionally well from me. So I really recommend this. And you can see these pictures, the two pictures on the right, these are the effects of high pH. So as you can see, the very rightmost one, this is one of the trees I planted in a potting mix with paver base. Paver base is basically crushed up limestone. As if you know, limestone is very basic. So it turned up the pH. Yes. So it turned all yellow. And then you can see this middle picture. This was actually taken at the Fruit and Spice Park in Florida. And like you mentioned, in South Florida, there's about 3 inches of soil, and then below it is just lime rock. So the pH is very high, and you can see the chlorosis on the leaves caused by high pH. So it's very important to keep the pH down with your soil and with the water. If your tree does show signs of high pH, you can always apply chelated iron to the leaves to help it, but you need to get to the base problem. So it's either in your soil or your water. You need to check that. And if it continues to stay yellow, I recommend putting in a new pot and replace the soil and check your water. And for lights, I recommend partial shade. And then for you guys in South California, San Diego, I noticed the climate varies. If you go to the coast, it's very cool, very nice. I really love the weather there. But if you go inland, it's like a desert. It gets really hot. So if you are inland and your temperatures are getting really hot, I recommend partial shade even more. I visited one of the growers out in the deserts, and he had all his Plinias under shade, and even then they were getting burnt leaves. They didn't look good. I believe he wasn't watering them enough. That's also a factor. But if you are in the desert, I'd recommend at least partial shade until they are established. And if you are towards the coast, where the temperatures are cooler, I think you'd be fine with full sun. Just make sure you water them. And for pruning, make sure some people do not prune their trees and others will prune their trees. There's arguments for both, but I recommend pruning it. Leave the top canopy alone, but you can take the lower branches off. This will let the sun hit the trunk, and when that happens, it really encourages flowering. So that's very important. But then a downside if you prune your trees are the birds and critters can easily see the fruits, so you have to protect them. And for fertilization, I recommend a slow release fertilizer, just like Hollytone. It's 4-3-4. It's very easy. You just scatter it around the base of your tree, every couple months, and then it'll do its job. It's very nice. I'd avoid fertilizers high in nitrogen, because nitrogen can also burn the leaves. So I recommend growing Jaboticabas in pots. This is the easiest key to successful and healthy trees. A lot of the collectors I visited in Southern California during this trip, they all grow their Jaboticabas in pots because they're able to control the pH and the light and the fertilizer. So it's very nice growing them in pots. As you can see here pictured is Plinia species Malacacheta. You can see how green it is, how how beautiful it is, and I always think it's because of the soil, the pot, how I take care of it. And now I'm going to go over propagation techniques. There are 3 propagation techniques that we use for Jaboticabas. First one is seeds. Second one is cuttings and air layering. And then the third one is graft. But for this reason, I do not go over cuttings and air layering in this presentation because it is not a viable technique. People here have managed to root cuttings that are about the size of a toothpick. So it's not really plausible. But in Asia, they're rooting thick pencil-sized branches, which allows for the trees to grow super fast and fruit faster. But we still haven't discovered how to root thick cuttings with a great success rate. And then same with air layering. That is also another way to get a big tree, but it is not very viable and the success rates are not that good.
One thing you can under the soil and it's air layering, just cover it up. And 3 months later, you'll have rootlings coming off of that. We don't put that off, and you got a new plant from your parent.
Moving on to propagation by seed. This is the most common way of growing Jaboticabas, and we use it with the rare selections that we can't source scions from. If we can source scions, we love doing that because it speeds up fruit production, but a lot of these things are rare, so we have to use seeds. And then there's also a lot of downsides, such as not being true to type, as we discussed with the Pitranthus. And also they can have a long wait till fruit, as we also mentioned. So to start Plinias from seeds, it's very simple. Once you get the seeds, you put them in a pot with well-draining mix, like we've discussed earlier. And then about 6 months to a year later, you can start uppotting them. And then you can even graft them onto mature trees to start speeding it up. And now I'm going to go over grafting Plinias. This is very important. If you collect Plinias, I highly recommend you learn more about grafting, because if you don't know how to graft, you will not be able to get a big collection. So by grafting, it speeds up fruit production and allows for the same genetics as the mother plant. And then we also can use the rootstock to increase hardiness to the environment. Do you remember the Sabra we talked about, the most common Jaboticaba in the world? Well, that one has increased drought tolerance and increased tolerance to higher pH. So by grafting new selections onto the Sabra, we are able to push these in, potentially harsher climates. So I'll basically walk you guys through how I graft Plinias. So you can see on the top left corner, I have the tools and the cutting that I'm going to graft. I have pruners, my grafting knife, which is Victorinox. You can search grafting knife on Amazon. It's about $25. Then I use buddy tape to wrap the scion. You can also use parafilm, but after I used buddy tape, I realized that it's superior. Yes. So you can see the scion I'm grafting in this. This is a variegated scarlet. So it's extremely rare. And it's not true from seed. If we got a whole bunch of these variegated scarlet seeds, they will not grow true to seed. So by propagation, we have to propagate these by grafting. So in the second picture, you can see I trimmed off the ends of the scion to a manageable size. And I also had to, there's several factors that came into play when I was selecting the scion. You have to use growth that is not actively pushing, because we want as much energy to be stored in the scion as possible for good success rates. Next, I will wrap the scion in buddy tape or parafilm. And then you can see in this third picture, I line it up with the rootstock. Plinia wood is not perfectly circular. It is more like an oval. So we can use this when we're grafting. If the rootstock is a little bit bigger, or the scion's a little bit smaller, something vice versa, we are able to twist the scion around to allow for the best cambium contact. And for grafting techniques, I will mostly use a cleft graft. This is what all the other growers mainly use. It's very easy to do and it's easy to replicate. So you can see I've cut the rootstock down about 1/2 inch, and then I've shaved down the scion in a V shape and I've aligned it. And then after that, I will wrap the union with buddy tape. The first time I go over, I just make sure to cover the whole union to protect it. The second time over, I will get another piece and I'll twist it, and then I will wrap it really tight. Unlike other trees, Jaboticaba grafts can be wrapped extremely tight. This allows them for better cambium contact because Jaboticaba wood is super hard. So you want to have a lot of pressure on the grafts to make it stick. And you can graft up to about 1/2 inch diameter wood. I've seen people do that, maybe even bigger, but you need to be very advanced in grafting. And even someone like me, I probably have anywhere from a 60 to an 80% success rate. So it takes a lot of trial and error and a lot of practice. Moving on to another technique of grafting, this is called approach grafting or inarching. So as you can see here, I've inarched one tree to another tree. So the smaller plant is Sabara, and this bigger one is my Sapusea tree, Plinia fitrantha. So I shaved off a little bit of the Sapusea tree and a little bit of the rootstock, and then I wrapped it up and then secured it with some more parafilm. And then about 1.5 months later, there was a union and it healed, and then I chopped off the top of the Sabara rootstock, and now there's 2 rootstocks on this tree. There's a benefit to this, as people have said it speeds up growth and also increases precociously of the tree. You can also use this to propagate more trees. If I inarched a higher branch, once it heals, I can cut it off and then I'll have another tree. And this may be a better technique for grafting, as if the graft fails, the scion is still attached to the mother tree and it is alive. So I can try grafting again. Whereas with the cleft graft, if the scion dies out, it's dead. Moving on to the widespread market of Jaboticabas. It's mainly in Asia, Brazil, and the USA, but also everywhere else. And as collectors in the United States, we continue to import and export new varieties. And a lot of collectors here and nurseries are discovering new hybrids. On the left, you can see a picture of a brand new Plinia into the US. This is called Plinia species willow. And as you can see, the leaves are very narrow. This is just imported just a couple months ago. It just shows that we're constantly, sharing and importing new varieties. And as with hybrids, we're also discovering a lot of new hybrids in the US. A lot of these new nurseries, a lot of the Plinias are close together. So when they flower, there's a lot of potential for cross-pollination. So there's Sabra and Grimmel hybrids, there's red and Grimmel hybrids, red and Trunciflora hybrids. I was fortunate enough to taste a red and Trunciflora hybrid, and I can tell you it's very great. It's very good, very sweet. It's definitely different than the red, definitely different than the Trunciflora. I think these hybrids have a great potential in the US. In the coming years, it'll be exciting to see what comes on. But now that you've learned about Jaboticabas, you want to grow them now, right? So what varieties do you suggest and where can I get them? So there are several subcategories on taste for Jaboticabas. So I'm collecting about one of each for taste. So we have the Sabra, Red, Grimmel, Cambuca, Coronata Hestinga, and Fitrantha Branca Vino. These are the basic varieties I'd suggest. You can probably add a couple more or subtract a couple more, but these cover all the different subcategories on taste. The Sabra Jaboticaba, as we've discussed, is one of the best. It's very sweet. The red Jaboticaba is also very sweet, but it has a berry flavor to it. The Grimmel one tastes like muscadines. The Cambuca one tastes like mangoes and peaches. The Coronata Hechtinga, I've not tried that one yet, but according to John Travis Morton, who has, he said it tastes like blueberry Tootsie Roll Pops. So it's something I want to get into. Hopefully mine can fruit soon. And then the Fitrantha Broncovino, this one is highly recommended by John also. He said it has a candy-like taste, very good. So after about 10 varieties, when you have about 10 different varieties, it becomes a collecting game. So once you get to about 10, you could probably stop and you can enjoy these fruits. But once you get to 10, it starts becoming a addiction. And then you start collecting more and more. And now I'm at around 70, 75. And as you can see here, this is Plinia spiritosantensis. It's a very beautiful leaf, new leaf. It's almost like purple black. And this one is also, something we want to just collect. It's for ornamental, It's very ornamental. We don't really know what the fruit tastes like. No one in the US has fruited it yet, but it's a very beautiful tree. So I will grow it. Now I'm going to go over some common resources that have really helped me growing Jaboticabas, or I'm friends with a lot of these people, or I've visited them, so I can highly recommend these people. First off, we have Anderson Tropicals. He is a nursery based off in Naples, Florida. He has a lot of these new Jaboticaba varieties, so if you're looking to get a lot of these rare ones, he sells on eBay. We also have Belami Trees. Another friend of mine, he's up in Kentucky. He's also importing these new varieties. We have Farrell Fruit Farm, James Farrell. He's down in Naples also. And he was selling a lot of rare seeds the last couple of years, and then he got busy with his family. But his website is still up, and he has a lot of Plinias and Mercierias and a lot of pictures and descriptions for these fruits and varieties. So I highly recommend visiting his site if you want to learn more about these. We have Flying Fox Fruits. This is Adam Shafran down in Central Florida. He's the guy who really hyped up the Jaboticaba market in the US. He's probably the OG collector of Jaboticabas. He's a great guy. I visited him several times. Very fun guy to visit. Next up, we have Frutas no Brazil by Harry Lorenzi. This is a book. It's in Portuguese. There was an English version, but it got discontinued. But this one, you can buy the English version on Apple Books. So if you have an Apple device, I highly recommend buying it. It covers some Plinias and Mercierias, and also a lot of other fruits. Then we also have Hapa Joe's Nursery. Joe is here, so you can definitely talk to him after the meeting. He's gone to Brazil and several countries down in South America. So he has experience of tasting these fruits, collecting these fruits, and meeting the people down there. He also has his nursery. And I highly recommend him too, because he's in South California too. He's local, so support a local business. There's also the Jungle Boy Nursery, which is by Luis Soares. Also another great resource I recommend for getting Plinias. He has a lot of these new ones coming out of Brazil. He's one of the only sources for these grafted trees from Brazil. So while a lot of us collectors are growing from seed, he is able to source these scions from Brazil and graft them. He is also local. He is in Oceanside. Very great guy. I was fortunate to meet him. Great collection. So if you're interested in these newer varieties, definitely make sure to hit him up. And then lastly, we have Morton and Sons Nursery. John Travis Morton out in Central Florida, Orlando area. He's a great guy. I visited him several times, a lot actually. A lot of my collection comes from him. My mom always jokes around that we're, giving him a lot of free money, but he has quality trees and he sells on eBay each week. So if you're looking to get more trees, search him up on eBay. And each week there's a new set of auctions you can buy trees from.
The only problem we have is some of these is, we have sometimes a hard time having them shipped to California. A lot of the nurseries will not ship to California.
I believe a lot of these nurseries will ship to California. I believe they're certified. I know Arizona is a big no-no state. Even when they're certified, they can't ship. But these nurseries I've listed, two of them are in California, and then the others are certified to ship to California. So now that we've covered the Plinia and Merciaria genus, we've learned about Jaboticabas, the propagation techniques, and basic care. You can now say you are educated in the art of growing Jaboticabas. So now I'm going to have a quiz or giveaway time. I'm going to be giving away several seeds of these varieties listed up. First one is the Red Lantern. It's a Pitrantha hybrid, fruiting in about 4 to 5 years. Fruits are very big and sweet. We have the Red Pouch. This is a hybrid of the Asu paulista, one of the Plinia cauliflora variants. And the collector says it's very tasty and also has big fruits. Next up, we have Giant Red Crystal, which is the middle right picture. It's a Pitrantha hybrid also with large fruits, upwards of 3.5 centimeters. So that's, for Jaboticabas, it is very big. And also we have the Pitrantha branca. This is a huge fruited one and said to be the largest of the white fruits. So I'm gonna ask some questions, and if you get it right, come see me after the talk and you can pick out your seeds. So if you know the answer to the question, you can raise your hand, and if you get it right, you get the seeds for free. So the first question is, what is the scientific name of the Cambuca? Does anyone know? Correct. All right. Second one. What is the most common Jaboticaba in the world? Correct. Third question. How many species of Plinia are there? Correct. And the fourth question is, what is one reason why we graft Jaboticabas? Correct. So that is all I'm giving out. But if you want to buy some seeds from me, I have them at a huge discounted price here. These normally retail for about $5 each, but I'm selling them for about a little over $1. So it's a great time to, maybe stock up on these new ones.
What's the technique for exporting seeds?
It's pretty simple. You just put them in some soil, keep them watered, and then put them in some shade. They should come up in about a month, and then by about the 1 year mark, you can start potting them up into bigger pots. I don't really have much to say about Mercianthas. A lot of these side genuses I don't really focus on. I know you may have some.
Yeah, probably the best tasting one is Rabiju. Mercianthus pungent. I actually think it tastes a lot like a Jaboticaba, and it's really nice because it's fruit like 4 years, and it's really juicy. Very similar taste. Locally, we probably are two main sources for Jaboticaba is Kwang Ong Nursery, and then Ben Poirier, Ben Subtropicals out in Valley Center. He handles a lot of eugenias and stuff.
You have a question?
And by the way, this stop after around 40.
Okay. So for these regular Jaboticabas, once they're mature, big trees, people have said they've taken down to around 20s, the low 20s. Maybe a little bit of leaf dieback, minor branch dieback, but they can take pretty cold temperatures. But again, they need to be mature, and also a lot of factors come into play when exposing these trees to cold. The trees in my greenhouse doesn't get below 40. And they all do pretty well, but in the winter they will slow down. The leaves may get a little bit yellowed, but here you should be able to grow them pretty easily. Yes, I would say that, and some collectors would say that too. Some Jaboticabas will lose a lot of their leaves in the winter. This could be because of our climate, but during the spring they'll come back out, So it's not, if your tree's losing leaves, just don't water it too much, and in spring it should come back. I have roll up sides, so I can just roll the sides up, and I have a couple of vents. So if you guys want to contact me, here's my contact information. I also have a website called graftatree.com. You can purchase plants and seeds in the future from me. The business is kind of going through a hard time right now. I don't know how to say it, but I'll be taking care of it. And when I get home from this vacation, I will rearrange it and start adding stuff for sale. Yes. Yes. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask. Yeah. Some of these variegated ones. Some of these variegated ones, like variegated Paulista. I know there's the variegated red too. I don't have those. I have variegated Coronata, variegated Scarlet, variegated, and variegated Sabra. So I have about 3. I hear there's another 3, so it's about half of them. They're very expensive.
A couple of things from Adam in your chapter. One thing I've never been able to talk him out of is the nice select grafted Jaboticaba. Have you got any good ones yet that he's able to
To my knowledge, no. He sells a lot of Pitanga tuba seedlings, but he has a whole bunch of trees at his farm, so you don't really know. He also has a Pitomba tuba. So he had a Pitanga tuba get crossed with a Pitomba. It's very cool fruit, but he's holding on to the seeds and protecting his tree. He's not gonna offer any for sale. It's gonna take a couple of years for him to start growing them out and selling them. I noticed he was selling a variegated Pitanga tuba on eBay. I want that too. But spending several $100s on a Pitanga tuba, I'll wait a little bit. I'll wait. No, these are actually selected varieties, so we grow them out for fruits. But these are Phitrantha hybrids, so the mother trees are very prolific and great. They've been selected in China and Taiwan for their characteristics. But again, with seeds. Oh, Sabra. Yes, Sabra is a great rootstock. So you can use that to graft on other varieties. As of now, I just have those 4 listed back here. These are seedlings from seeds from selected varieties, so we'll just plant them out and we'll wait until they fruits from seed. Any other questions?
You mentioned that you can graft them, but they still take 10 years.
With grafting, it speeds it up by a whole lot. There's a lot of factors that influence it, but rootstock size, the rootstock is big, faster. Scion size also, and age. If the scion has been fruiting, it's generally likely to fruit faster versus if a scion was not flowering or fruiting on it. So that's why I recommend buying grafted trees, because mature wood, quick to fruits.
Why does it take so long to fruit?
Okay, so they're very slow to fruits for several reasons. Well, we don't really know actually, but there are ways in growing them to try to speed up fruit. So Jaboticabas will focus on growing their roots out first, then the shoots, and then it'll start fruiting. So I grow, and many other people grow Jaboticabas in pots. So by potting them up quickly, you're giving the roots a lot of room to grow. So the tree is not going to want to fruit as fast. But if you slowly pot it up, it'll constrict the roots and they'll start focusing on the canopy and then it'll start to fruit pretty quick. So you can either grow them out, repot them really fast and they'll grow fast, bigger tree. But then if you want them to fruit, you want to slowly pot them up. And by slowly potting them up and leaving them in the shade, people have fruited them pretty.
You don't want to get root out.
Yes. There's a lot of variable factors, but yes, if you put it in the ground, it will probably take longer fruit. And also, if you have a fruiting Jaboticaba and then you plant it in the ground, it will start to focus on the roots. So it may take a break off of fruiting for a little bit. Mhm. So when you plant seeds out, they will use the energy in the seed and they will shoot up, 4 to 6 inches. And then after that, it transitions to the roots. So it can kind of get stunted. So you kind of it's a waiting game. You can try to fertilize them a little bit. Also, you may want to check your soil and the water and, where it is it in full sun? If it's in full sun, it can get shocked. So, you want to kind of figure out where it is and, yeah, shade is good. So maybe check your soil. Maybe check your soil. But they will stall out after, Plinias love water. So you can't really overwater them. As long as your soil is well draining, it's good to water them. I water mine about once a day. Yes, that's correct. Water is great. Flooding them is great too. A lot of these can take flooding for several months. Like the Sabra can take flooding for about 3 months, 4 months. But after a certain time, the roots will start to rot. But several months at a time, flooding is okay.
Yeah.
That's very dependent on the season and the variety. Some of mine will do it once a month. Some of mine will do maybe 4 flushes a year. Just
You're talking
depends.
about new flushes.
Yes, new growth flushes. Yes. Oh.
Yeah. Like a mango almost. They grew up now as bigger leaves.
It's a game of patience, but you can also, fertilizer, watering, you can help it push more often. Also, I've noticed if my nutrients is down or the pH is high, the flushes will be, small compared to in a good condition. So giving them the best conditions possible, bigger growth spurts more frequently. Any more questions? Oh, hi. Thank you.